Hey there, friends. So this is just a follow-up on the last video I did on how I use the Michael Brauer technique and the actual template. Just to recap just a bit so it's clear what I'm talking about here. I paid like 99 bucks at puremix.com to watch the videos. And if you take the whole course, you get the actual template he uses. However, you're not going to have all those plugins. I had most of them because I'm obsessed and I have a lot of plugins, and I've been doing professional recording and record making for over 32 years, so I've amassed some. But I had to get quite a few to complete the template completely and fully, so that's what I did. However, I also augmented it with a few things of my own. Sometimes, for instance, there might be a plugin that he fancies that I think I have something better, like his Zaner plugin, which I owned the one he uses, which is the Soft Tube Chandler's Germanium Zaner limiter. I preferred the Kazrock, and it just sounds better to me. So that's what I'm using. And there'll be a few instances like that. And you can do the same. In fact, I actually completed a template for my laptop, for my travel laptop, where I used quite a few free plugins from like Analog Obsession and some other places to make it work for me, because I don't have all the plugins on that computer that I have here on my main desktop, because the authorizations may be, say, for only one computer, like the waves, unless you buy two computers, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just to set this up. Secondly, what I'm doing here today is showing you a completed version of what I did last time, because I went further, I tweaked a little more. Now, I know that some of you don't understand this music that we're doing. Let me backtrack a little there and explain. These are some of the greatest musicians living in London right now. Ray Russell was one of the most renowned studio guitarists in London for over 50 years. He's played on every Bond score since Goldfinger, many records. He's like the equivalent of Reggie Young in America here in England. Eddie Prevost is the founding member of AMM Music. He's the drummer, percussionist, and he basically, along with his buddies, created free improvisation. And Nathan Moore is my bandmate in the London Experimental Ensemble. I think he's the finest guitar player here in England right now. And the three of them came together to make a record, and I produced it. Now, they just play what they feel. It's completely improvised. It's not scored. There's no notes. There's no charts. It's completely based on feel, bouncing off each other. I mean, it would take a much deeper discussion of what free improvisation is, specifically English, European free improvisation. It differs greatly from the American version. But let's just say they play what they feel. It's more about sounds than notes, but they are very accomplished musicians. They know what they're doing. If you put a chart in front of them, they could play it note for note. That's just not what they do when they get together. So before we go deeper into this, I just want you to understand that, because a lot of people are like, what is this? Okay, I get it. It's not, a rock record. It's not a pop record. It's a fully improvised performance. There was over 2.5 hours, and we're going to cull it down to about an hour. But honestly, all 2.5 hours were amazing, in my opinion. I sent what you heard last time to Bob Olson, my mentor. Bob Olson started at Motown in 1962, and I was fortunate enough to work with him for 22 years in Nashville before I moved here to London. So I always check with Bob, because Bob's I can't fit all the info in my head that he has taught me. It's incredible. We need those people around. So I sent what you heard last time to Bob, and I said, hey, the group likes this. What do you think? And he was like, yeah, it's really good. And he tends to use his own version of the Brauer template, which is to say multiple buses and each bus is doing something different and very subtly, and it's making your mix, your performance, your recording breathe. And it's very natural and organic, if you will. Bob has tended to do that for his whole career, but transferring it to digital, he uses the same type of thing. So I sent it to him, and he's like, if I were you, I think it needs a little more depth. And how do we get depth? Well, we get depth by EQ, we get depth by compression, and we get depth by delays and reverbs. I had some reverb last time. I didn't have any delay going yet. I hadn't gotten to that point, and Bob was correct. For instance, the toms sounded amazing on the drum kit, but they were very upfront. So by compressing them on the channel that they exist on, the recorded audio channels, which were then sent to many buses, I compressed them. And then I sent them to some very, very short room-esque delays. And then also in some case, maybe even put a room on them rather than sending to a bus with the mix at around 50%, all to bring them back, to have them not as forward, but push them back into the sphere of what you're hearing. And I did that with a few other things. I made the room come alive more and made it maybe a little bit wider. There was one stereo room mic. There was also a very distant mic on the drums, and I gave that some dimension and eliminated with some EQ some of the extreme low end on the drums because I thought it was overwhelming, the whole performance in general. I tightened up the pans on the guitars. The guitars were like at around 60% in Pro Tools. I brought them to 45. I also sent the guitars out to some compression of their own, but not too drastic. Anyway, this was one of many things I did, and you're going to hear the difference. But what I want to do first is show you some of the channels, because it seems like people are really into this kind of setup. And so what you have to know is, I think it's totally worth it, by the way, to pay the $99 and watch Michael Brauer and his engineer, his assistant, show you how they do this. But again, you're going to have to tweak it. You're going to have to work with what plugins you have, but you can get a lot of free plugins to do the same things. Now, a big part of this is the calibration of the compression. So I want to make a note of this because someone asked me, they're like, oh, well, can you do something I could relate to more that's more like, a traditional rock thing, with a vocal, bass, guitar, drums? Yes, I will do that because I did do one of those mixes before I left Nashville to London with this template. And I'll pull it up. I never finished it because it was for some YouTube thing that somebody wanted me to do where we were all contributing mixes that they would show a few minutes of on their channel. So I never finished it because it was literally 3 days before I was packing up everything in Nashville and moving over here. But, it's 90% of the way there. I'm not even going to dig in and do any more with it, but I will pull that up next. That'll be a separate video, and I will show you how I do a traditional rock, vocal, pop performance, traditional instrumentation, playing a song, a real song, I think a Bon Iver song. So there you go. It was for a Bon Iver thing. And it's cool. The difference is when this template exists. See, right now, this template that I'm going to show you is just for a fully instrumental thing. So I got rid of all the vocal sends. I got rid of all the vocal channels. I got rid of all the vocal compression buses because they weren't necessary. So in that session, you will have vocal, bass, guitar, the whole gamut of what you might want to use to approach this. For now, we don't have those things. So to make it easier to mix, because it was much easier, I got rid of 30 different channels that weren't going to be pertinent. But I will do that, and I will show you how it works in that context, and then you can take it further from there. So I'm going to turn the camera around. I'm going to show you what's going on here. And basically what I'm going to do is show you how I created more depth and then let you hear it. And then in a couple of days, we'll do that other video so you can see how it works on a traditional recording. All right? All right. So I apologize that I don't have capture software on here, but the reason is you want as little on your Pro Tools computer as possible, because when you're running this many tracks and plugins, you don't want anything interfering with it. And traditionally, Bob Olson and I have kept our recording computers just for recording, not for video, not for any other purpose. So here we go. So what I did on the toms is I went in and I cut a little bit here. You can see I did a little bit of EQ. That one is the rack tom. This is the floor tom. And then on the rack and floor, I used the MJUC, which I don't know, is it free? I can't remember if I've had it for so long, I can't remember if it's free, but Klanghelm makes a lot of free stuff. And I'm crushing this a little bit, not too bad, 4-to-1, but I'm aggressive on the input of the compression. And that's the same for both toms. And the other thing I did differently was I auto-aligned the drums to eliminate any phasing. So as you can see right here, the drum tracks are now auto-aligned, not the room. I left the room out because the room was picking up quite a bit of guitar, so I didn't want to mess with that. So that was the first way I dealt with the toms, is by EQ and compression. And I also did a little EQ, as you can see here, some really modest cut and a shelf on the kick, just to give that a little bit more dimension. Brauer, on all the drum tracks, he'll have the SSL 4000E on every drum track. And then on the guitars and bass, he will have the 9000J. And I went through and I'm compressing those channels. Like he doesn't, if you take this course, you'll see he doesn't say, don't do the compression or EQ on the actual channels. So those are the guitar tracks. And the other thing I did was there was plenty of hi-hat in the overhead. I loved the way the hi-hat sounded on the hi-hat channel, but it was just too much. So I brought the toms down a little bit. That's right here. I brought them down in volume, but then I'm compressing them 8-to-1 on the bus of their own, and a little bit more EQ. And then sending them to, in this delay section here, I started doing some delays, I used satin with the slapback steroids. And that is the Ampex channel. He has an Ampex there, but I kind of preferred the satin slapback rather than the Ampex. It sounds really, really, really good. So only the room channels, the stereo room is getting the satin, and I've got a Pro Q3 there if I need it, but it wasn't necessary. And then the toms and the overhead are going to this SD3000, which he uses some form of SD3000. I like the Nembrini digital delay. And this is the Andy Capillato Vintage Stereo Room 02 setting that I settled on. I might have tweaked it a little bit, and if it's 100% wet, of course. And then after that is the Brauer Motion Delay Mover preset. And that will get you some motion. And then the guitars are going to this EC3000 channel. And that's he uses that as like an analog delay channel. I chose to put the Arturia 201, the Space Echo vibe kind of with it. And I'm driving the input pretty well, 13.7. I've got the original preamp set there. And then I put I love this Waves Kaleidoscope modulation plugin. It's crazy. So I have it's a flanger phaser kind of combination, but it's mixed very low. The mix on each channel, one is 13.2 and the other one is 10.1. So it's very, very subtle. And that's what was necessary. And that's going to the guitars. And those are the only delays that are being used, but they were not being used in the last mix and the last video I was doing. These would be the lead vocal comps. I kept these in now. I didn't have them in originally because some of these compressors ended up working really well to bring some of the tracks that you were hearing back more and giving the mix a little bit more dimension by compressing them a little bit more, putting them in the back, giving that depth. And again, those are the TLA 100A from Softtube. That's what he uses. The Pawn Shop comp, that's what he uses. The guitars are going to the Pawn Shop comp. The True Dynamics is what Michael uses as well. I already own that. That's for the Presto channel. The Blue Stripe, I've got the purple, but I've got the UA Blue Stripe too, so it doesn't matter. Whatever you like, you can put there. There's a lot of free plugins from Analog Obsession. I've got in the Distressor channel, I've got this, which I've got 4 different Distressor plugins. And I'm using this one because this one is set to nuke. This is one of the few that can do the nuke setting of the hardware. And the drums are now going to that as well, which are helping them sit back a little bit. The Fairchild channel is muted. And the Vox, I'm not using the VoxBox channel, but just to show you that, I use the Brauer setting for the Manley VoxBox from UA. And then he uses the Oxford inflator set to 92% with a curve of 33. The input is 3.91. The output is minus 4.13. That's what he does. And then to get rid of some sibilance, because he's usually running this to a vocal, boom, the Pro Q3. It could be the Pro Q4. I have that as well. So That's what's changed. The other channels, he's got these channels here, the Fed, the K-Punch. All of these are exactly the same that Michael uses. The only difference is that I changed is on the Akai, I have the Corniff Shure level lock going first, and then the Brauer Motion, which is another one of his presets second. He's got a bunch of presets in a lot of different plugins by different companies, which is very useful if you do this. And then this is the boilers. I think I showed this last time. It's the Red 37, the virtual mix rack with the FG116, and then the Neve. And then again, another Red 37. So all of this is the same as it was last time. If you watched that video, nothing has changed. I might have tweaked some settings a little here and there, but not too much. And then on the Fed channel, I want to show you, he's got the SPL Transient Designer Plus, but this is the Fed plugin by Fuse Audio Labs. And these are the settings that he uses: a release of 5, a ratio of 4:1, side chain off, et cetera, et cetera. His threshold is around 3.7, but hey, you do what you do. Do what you want. And I think I brought in still the same reverbs. I think I changed the guitars to the Primavera, the Pulsar Primavera. I think originally I had the Eventide Spring, and I think I'm not using the Atlantis, which is what I use for the Altiverb that he uses. The plate I showed you last time, I'm using the PSP, and then the Quantex is the room. This is my room with the Quantex Relab plugin. I love this setting for a really great sounding room, and that's on the channel that he calls Capital, the Capital Chambers. And then for the Bricasti, I originally had my Bricasti plugin, but guess what? This Magic 7 is free, and it sounded better. So there you go. There you got a free plugin, Magic 7 Bricasti. Incredible. So, and the only other thing I do differently from Michael Brauer is a mid channel. And that's this last channel here. And what I do is I just do a very, very broad cue at 605, almost 606 hertz. And I bring it into taste. It just focuses the mids in a very, very open way when necessary. Just makes it a little more punchy without it being spiky. That's the only thing I do differently from him. And then my output fader, I do use the Red 17 as first on the channel. I got the God Particle at 75%. That's exactly what he does. I use the Tape Zoo. He doesn't do that, but this is a new plugin. This is my preset for the master channel. It's really good. Sounds fantastic. Check it out if you haven't heard about this yet. It really just opened it up and gave it incredible dimension. And then he uses the Studer, I think, on the output, but this new Pulsar Modular P821 Stevens tape that Mark Daniel Nelson did. Unbelievable. This is my preset. Super fantastic. Really open, clean, but nice, subtle saturation. And then finally, like Michael does, I put the invisible limiter. This is just as a safety. Just as a safety, just in case, especially when you're doing music that's so dynamic like this. I monitor with the Ulean loudless meter on, and the low was 21.3 and the high was 0.6, right? So 0.06. So that's like a 20 dB, almost 18 dB LUFS dynamic range, which is insane. So you definitely want to have the invisible limit or whatever, you just don't want to set this with any gain. You just want it as a protector. All right. So what I will do now is play you the latest version of the same thing that I played you before. See, it's all highlighted there. It's the same track. It's the same place. But if you compare them, I think you'll see that it's a lot better and has more depth. The group, the musicians were very, very pleased, and they have told me, okay, we're done. We're good. So this is it. Let's take a listen. So there you go. Now here's a lesson to be learned, because I've been doing this for 32 long years. If you're an aspiring musician, there's more than one way to express yourself. And you should keep an open mind, because there's a lot of ways to make a living in the music business. Same goes for if you're an engineer or a producer. There are people making music throughout the world that may not fit into a narrow box that you've been exposed to. And you have to keep your mind open, because the goal is to make a living and have fun and make music. That said, that's what's going on. So what I'm going to do next is do that video for you with a more traditional type recording and go through the Brauer template for that and see if maybe that gives you some different perspective or it's more relatable for you. It works with any style of music. I've done jazz with it. I've done pop, rock, and free improvisation. It just works because of the way it breathes. And you're going to need to take your time with it if this is the kind of thing I think it took me a few weeks of messing around every day to get it to where, I understood what it was going for, what the ultimate goal was to achieve, and then where my perspective and my experience fit into it, and then how to adapt my previous knowledge and experience in it as well with the plugins that I owned. The idea is to recreate an analog setup with sort of unlimited gear, I guess. So, because that's what Michael did all those years. I love it. It's like I can get a mix going within hours that feels good. This is better than it was last time, thanks to Bob Olson's input. The only thing left to do is volume rides. And Nathan, one of the guitar players on this record, is coming over in a couple of days, and we're going to sit down and we're going to chop up to, get it from 2.5 hours to an hour. And then the only thing left once we're at that stage is volume rides. The rest is achieved and completed by this template. All the sounds, all the relationships, all the pumping and breathing. And now when I say pumping, I don't mean like, it's very natural. It's the template. So, I think it takes less work to get to the point where I'm feeling like it sounds right. Like it sounds like a record. Like it sounds like when I was in the studio with them, listening to them tracking. So I hope you got something out of that. Again, I'll see you in a couple days, and I appreciate you stopping by. And even if you don't like the music, participating, I'll try to meet you halfway in a couple of days. All right. Thanks a lot. Take care.